Hello, this is Celeste of Astrology by Celeste, and I'm here on YouTube for a impromptu live because the Donald Trump and E. Jean Carroll rape case verdict was announced today, and he was found liable for sexual assault as well as he has to pay her $5 million in defamation, I believe. So, anyway, I wanted to talk about the astrology of this event. But first, I would like to let people know that I am having a new moon in Taurus workshop that's going to be next week on Thursday, May 18th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. If you can't join live, you can get the recording. But I recommend joining live because I do hot takes on people's natal charts where I see what I look at your chart, see what I think may be coming up for you, and discuss that. So, anyway, you can go to astrologybyceleste.com or I'll drop, just go to astrologybyceleste.com in my events page and you can sign up for the workshop. Okay, let's get talking about Donald Trump's chart. And Donald Trump has one of the most, how do I share my screen? Let me see. Tripod wants to share entire screen. Yeah, share this screen. Okay. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Donald Trump has one of the most interesting charts that any astrology student should, take a look at because he's such a public figure and there's so many things that jump out about his chart. Number one, we know he's a Gemini sun and he's got his sun next to the North Node of Destiny. So, sun in the 10th house, next to Uranus in the North Node, the surprise win of the election in 2016. You can see that here in his chart, as well as you see this trine, Jupiter trine Uranus. That is like surprise, amazing, wonderful thing happens to me. Jupiter is the planet of abundance, blessings, good luck. Uranus, like shocks and all sudden things, surprising things. Yeah. And having his sun in the 10th house, speaks to being a leader as well. Yeah. And he's got his ascendant at 29 degrees of Leo. And that's on the fixed star Regulus. It's the star of royalty, and people with planets or points on Regulus are well known for it's a star that gives wealth, military power, leadership, all of that. It's the king star. So it's one of the most famous fixed stars. It's one of the royal fixed stars of Persia. And those used to mark the seasons, but they don't anymore. Anyway, we won't go down that road. Now, he also has his midheaven on the fixed star Algol. Now, Algol's at 26 Taurus, his midheaven's at 24 Taurus, but he is a very Algol figure. We can think about how the insurrection almost beheaded democracy. Algol is the Medusa myth. It's associated with beheading and things like that for that. And it's got a lot of intensity. So I mean, sometimes people with Algol prominent in their chart can be involved with scientific things, but there's always a sense of intensity about something involved in their life. And his midheaven, an intensity about his career, his reputation, and that sort of thing. So, the thing about eclipse seasons are a time where things come into our lives. They can land like a whisper, like nothing happened, or they can be an avalanche or somewhere in between, or they can be like you win the proverbial lottery with eclipses. And so just setting the stage about the timing of all of this is that the solar eclipse on April 19th, let's put it around his chart. Yeah. The solar eclipse on April 19th is really a great example of astrology in action and what is going on with this very public figure, Donald Trump. So, the sun and the moon met at 29 degrees of Aries in his very public ninth house, not public, in his ninth house of legal affairs. So, he's a public figure, and this eclipse happened in his ninth house of legal affairs, and legal affairs are public. So anyway, you can see the sun and the moon at 29 degrees of Aries in an exact trine with his um, Leo ascendant. And trines are easy flows of energy. It just shoots down with no resistance. Now, we generally think of trines as positive, but it's just like things can really happen fast without any resistance. Yeah. And so you also see Jupiter in the sky, and Jupiter is the planet of law, truth, judges, wisdom, a lot of different things. But for this discussion, we'll focus on law and justice. See this here at 23 degrees of Aries and in an exact square with his Saturn. Saturn brings consequences. Saturn is limits, restrictions, hardship. So, illegal consequences. And see how he has his Saturn right next to Venus. Yeah. So, legal consequences for the involvement relations with women, as well as financial consequences we can see coming up for him in this eclipse season. Yeah, and the first thing that happened, and eclipses can come in like 6 weeks before, and the energy, it's these huge new moon and full moons that have they're like the big turning points in our lives. You can always look back to typically you can look back to the eclipse preceding or right after and see the story there. And so he was indicted by Alvin Bragg in New York about the hush money case for Stormy Daniels um, back then. And eclipses work together. The solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse, like there's something connected with both of their stories. And you can really see in this eclipse also, you can see the story about rape because Mercury Uranus, a judgment, a verdict around Uranus, a chaotic rape is a very is what has been alleged by her, or what, yeah, it's not alleged anymore. What she said was that she was leaving a department store and ran into him. They knew each other, and he asked her to help buy a gift for someone. And so they were bantering, went upstairs, and he wanted her to try on some lingerie, and she said, "No, why don't you try it on?" And he like used brutality as retaliation, I guess, because she insulted his manhood or whatever. Anyway, w- Taurus, the lunar eclipse, we'll look at now. A big thing about this lunar eclipse, which I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, is that the sun in Taurus opposite the moon in Scorpio were both squaring Black Moon Lilith. So you see at the eclipse, sun in Taurus opposite moon in Scorpio, squaring Black Moon Lilith in Leo. So what we can see with that is Sun in Taurus, a department store. Department stores are Taurian. They're places where you go get like clothes and and other things that you buy, Venusian things. Venus rules Taurus. And the moon in Scorpio, one of the shadows of Scorpio is sexual abuse. So you can see that story and squaring Black Moon Lilith. Lilith was Adam's first wife who would not be subservient or would not be silent. So one of the things I've been saying about this eclipse season is that I wondered if, looking for prominent women or women who won't be silenced or women who are doing things that are considered, unladylike or not subservient or things like that. Some of them have also been shocking. Like just today, I read about a woman who killed her ex-husband, or she's been arrested for killing her ex-husband. And she wrote a grief book about it. So it's very in line with the astrology of that Black Moon Lilith squaring the sun and the moon. Anyway, let's not get too off on a tangent, but I do want one tangent to say Succession. I'm loving watching the HBO TV show Succession every week live. Normally, I won't watch anything like that. I like to see it all at once, but it's been great watching the astrology show up with that show. And I won't spoil anything, but Shiv is doing a Black Moon Lilith this season. And her brother Kendall is a Taurus sun. And we don't know Roman's astrology, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was a Scorpio. He might be a Sagittarius. But anyway, like shows some, the birthdays of certain of the characters, and Roman is a Taurus. Okay, on track. We're talking about Donald Trump. So this is a story about the lunar eclipse, as well as the lunar eclipse. Mercury is retrograde, and it went retrograde almost like in conjunction with Uranus. So there's a lot of shocking Uranian stories coming up in the news. And this event happened like 30 some years ago, as well as with the Stormy Daniels hush money payment. So we can see the story in Trump's chart about him having to be facing consequences, Saturn, in a legal setting, ninth house, as well as ninth house, as well as Jupiter transiting there for things done long ago. Mercury retrograde brings our ghosts back. And today is the day of the verdict. And for those of you who listen to my podcast, you know that I said I thought there was a good chance that today, the day that the sun meets Uranus, because when planets are talking in the sky that talk in our chart. Oh, and you can, if you have, you're feel free to ask any questions or put a comment in the chat. I can see it. What did I just do? I made it smaller. Okay. Anyway, when planets are talking in the sky and we have them talking in our chart, those will be days often something will happen in our own lives. So you can see how Donald Trump he's a Sun Uranus conjunction. It's within 5 degrees. And today the Sun and Uranus were conjunct. So today's word of the day for the podcast is justice. And I talked about this Sun Uranus, thinking that he might be found guilty in a surprise verdict. Now, he wasn't found guilty of rape, but he was found guilty of sexual abuse and defamation, everything but, and he has to pay her $5 million. And what's interesting about this is her chart, Jean Carroll. We know her birthday, but not her birth time. So her chart is on the outside and his chart is on the inside. And I predicted that he may be held guilty or liable. I don't know what you call it in a civil case, because of their interaction in each other's charts. So you can see how she has her Jupiter is on his Mars. So this is literally justice for Mars and Leo. Mars rules sex, rape, violence, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So you can see that right there in the chart. And there's something else. Oh, her Saturn, look at this. Her Saturn is on his sun. So Saturn is like a heavyweight blanket on us. Yeah. So consequences, for what happened to her. And the other thing, yeah. Was there something about her Venus? Mm, anyway, that's good enough. You get the picture. But you can see we don't have her birth time, but you can see this event in her chart where she says, you know, this is a very shocking, it just happened so fast kind of thing. You can see how her Mars in Gemini um as between Uranus and Saturn. Like nothing happens to us that's not in promised in our natal chart. And by promised, it doesn't have to happen, but things are not going to happen that aren't there. And this is literally an unexpected rape by a Gemini. You can see Mars, Saturn, like you come up against, you're taking action and someone else like um stops you, and it's very sudden Uranus. So you can see that in her chart there, as well as she has um, her Venus is in a square with Pluto. Venus square Pluto, like someone overpowering her. You often see like Mars square Pluto or Venus square Pluto in charts where people have had, brutality against them. So I showed that, and you've got this yod, this Mercury in Capricorn. Interesting. This yod, Mercury at the top of a yod, and you've got her Uranus at the base, Uranus sextile Pluto at the base. Yeah. And Donald Trump is a Gemini sun, Leo, Leo rising. Like you can just so see it in her chart. And what was the other thing I wanted to say about this? I think you get, oh, today. Why today? Also. Okay, so the inner wheel is Donald Trump, and the outer wheel is his today exact transit. Mars in the sky is conjunct his natal Saturn. So sometimes Mars transits come in earlier, but Saturn transits often you will find a Saturn transit is to the day. Either a planet is talking to your Saturn or your Saturn's talking to an outer planet's talking to your Saturn, or Saturn's talking to one of your planets. Transit Saturn's talking to one of your planets. You will see to the day things happen in your life. And you can see this Mars 23:48, Saturn 23:48. This happened today, May 9th at 12:39 p.m. in Queens. So, yeah, Mars rape, Saturn consequences, literally is, and you see this Venus right here. And it's so interesting with his chart. And see, today is the day Sun Uranus conjunction in his ninth house. Kind of surprising verdict because it happened a while ago. But look at this, Jupiter, the truth, Jupiter, justice in a trine to his ascendant. And this is a great example of a trine. The jury came back within 3 hours. Kaboom! They were like, "Phew, he did it," but they probably argued a bit over rape or not rape. Okay, let's see. Oh, yes. Yeah, you like to see, yes, MSB. Yeah, yeah. Saturn transits and Uranus transits are often to the day. Mars transits, you'll see them coming in a couple days before. So the action, may happen a few days before the actual transit. Yeah. So with Mars, but any transits, within 2 degrees on either side is especially 2 degrees, 2 degrees applying versus 2 degrees separating. So applying when before the transit is perfected, separating after 2 degrees on either side, you can often see stuff happening. But I like to be really tight. I like to see it within 1 degree on either side. Yeah. So that's what we're seeing for him today. We're also seeing, and this is another reason I predicted he may have some. This may be he may finally get consequences for his action because he's been doing stuff for decades that he's gotten away with. And I believe it's Demetra George talks about how his Saturn and Saturn rules consequence is what's called bona fide. It's between the benefics, Venus and Jupiter. So you can see his Jupiter is applying to his Saturn, and Venus is separating from his Saturn. So his Saturn consequences, there's this like protection between the two benefics. It's the opposite of being like besieged, where you're between, there's a planet between two malefics, Mars and Saturn. So yeah, he's got this bona fide Saturn, but it's like Saturn in Aquarius has basically broke that bonification as Saturn rubbed against his descendant back and forth 3 times before moving into Pisces. Anyway, so there's a bunch of other things going on in his chart as well. So we talked about, the eclipses as well as Jupiter in a trine to his ascendant. See here, Chiron in the sky is opposite his Jupiter in Libra as well, exact today. Yeah, he's in a Chiron opposition. And, in his eighth house of, the eighth house can be about where our loss is someone else's gain, and Jupiter, his wealth. Yeah. It's also it's within 5 degrees of the ninth house. So you could call it ninth house, third house. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah. Is Pluto, oh, hi, Anna. Is Pluto retrograde involved? Yeah, you can think about Pluto retrograde. It's brutality from something that happened a long time ago. And see how Pluto is right here on the cusp of his sixth house. The sixth house is the house of toil. It's a house of it's a house of, it's considered a house of bad fortune. And yeah, and Pluto transforms and burns things down to the stud. So it's so interesting. Pluto going into the sign of Aquarius, the sign of the people, opposite, and he's got, planets in Leo, the sign of the royalty. Leo's hierarchical, whereas Aquarius is, we're all on the same kind of playing field kind of stuff. So yeah, you can see that with as well, the Pluto going into Aquarius, and now it's retrograde. He doesn't have anything right at 0 degrees, so it's not making an exact aspect to his chart, but this is definitely a Mercury retrograde story and a Pluto retrograde story. Yeah. Yeah, and E. Jean Carroll is a writer. Mercury. Yeah. Oh, and Pluto's, it's not quite King Kong's Venus. Yeah. But anyway, that's that. Let me see if there's anything else. I think it's also interesting. Yeah. Hmm. Ceres is in a sextile with his Saturn. Ah, series about, yeah, that's really interesting. There's something, I wonder, something about daughters may come, it would come up because at the exact time of this transit, his moon is in his fifth house. The fifth house is the house of sex. The transit moon is in his fifth house, right conjunct this asteroid Pallas Athene, which is that's also again about justice. And but it's Zeus's daughter. There's daughter imagery with Pallas Athene, and there's mother imagery with Ceres, the asteroid in Virgo. Mm, yeah, it just something that's popped into my head. A tangent. Anyway. Anyway, I hope this is oh, you have to run. But yeah, you can watch the recording later, MSB. Yes. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. Yeah. Oh, and you see Chiron is sextile his Uranus. Like he's being wounded financially and legally about, Uranian actions that he took. He just refuses to, play by any rules of society or any of those it's so interesting because he's a Gemini, and Geminis typically, they're sociable, like to connect with others, but Uranus, he's like so willing to, just say horrible things to people or whatever and do horrible things to people. Yeah. Yeah. And I love how he's got all these planets in Libra. Chiron, his Chiron's conjunct his Jupiter. He's finally getting some, wounds and also Saturnian consequences. Yeah. Okay. I think I said everything I wanted to say. Also, it's interesting. Neptune, it transit Neptune in his eighth house of shared resources. Again, where your loss is someone else's gain. So he's, this is who knows what else other lawsuits he'll have to pay because people, will be able to get to get justice for his actions. Neptune quincunx Mars in Leo. Quincunx says move us into new situations. So because of his actions, this a sexual assault, Neptune, it's like dissolving his bank account, like his shared assets, his resources. He's now has this debt that's going to be collected. Yeah, the 8th house is the house of debt. Okay. I think I talked about everything I wanted to talk about that, but the timing of this is right on time. Yeah, and so this week is really interesting. Let me also let's see. For the transits, that's something else I want to say about the transits going on. I've been really interested to see how these stories were going to show up because this week Venus is trine Saturn, and both of them are Venus in Cancer, trine Saturn in Pisces, and both of them are in a sextile with Mercury retrograde, and Mercury is moving to sextile Saturn. So, like consequences for past events, things involving women. Yeah, I'm really interested to see the other stories that show up. Like I said earlier, I think I mentioned the woman who killed her husband and then wrote a children's book about it. It was arrested. Yeah, so she was a very Venus in Cancer. This mother, also Mercury, wrote a book, but now she's like Saturn and Pisces, consequences for um, killing her husband with drugs, fentanyl, Saturn and Pisces, hardship from drugs. Yeah, death from drugs. Literally, Saturn is the grim weak reaper. Donald Trump should have an astrologer, but he likes to do his own thing. His first wife, Ivanka, was interested in astrology and I guess had his chart done or something. So he's aware of astrology. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, he wouldn't listen to anyone anyway, probably, even if he had one. So I think that's that. So yeah, look for stories that have like home and family, and Mars is in Cancer too. Story women and mothers, and like Saturn and Pisces stories. So story like water stories, drug stories. Yeah, and people who are mercurial writers, writers, journalists, speakers, all kinds of drivers, that kind of stuff. Okay. So anyway, I am having a new moon workshop on May 18th. I hope you'll join me then. And yeah, if you have any questions before I sign off, uh, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yeah. Okay. I hope everyone's uh eclipse season is going better for you than it is for Mr. Trump. Yes, I do. Okay, take good care. Thank you for watching.